We are the New Dad Rock. Welcome to another episode, friends, neighbors. This is the New Dad Rock.
It is, and we're going to talk about metal today. More metal.
Again?
Yeah.
Yes! I've won!
Yeah, you earned it. You deserve it, man. Basically, after we did the top 10 of the big four, and then I'm like, wait a minute, Iron Maiden isn't even here, and that's your favorite band, or was your favorite band, or is one of your favorite bands of all time. I'm like, why isn't Iron Maiden in this list?
Well, as you even mentioned last week in the episode about the big four, Iron Maiden was a huge inspiration to all four of those bands. So the tree branched off from there.
I see.
And Iron Maiden came up in the late 70s, early 80s. So they were a few years ahead of the big four of thrash. That's were the early to mid 80s. You know, they came up out of London and they kind of forged their own scene.
Oh, I see. And the big four are those all American bands, the big four? Yeah, California, New York, California.
Yeah, three of them from California, one from New York.
Yeah, right on. That's where music should come from.
Didn't Kool Keith say that?
Oh, I don't know. But
Dr. Octagon?
Man, talk about good music.
First people, New York and California.
Oh, that album and the Black Elvis Lost in Space album by Kool Keith, really good. He's from Long Island. Do you live near him? Does he live in Patchogue?
Patchogue? I'll have to look it up and get back to you.
Yeah, man.
But how did we start talking about Iron Maiden and now we're talking about Kool Keith?
I think you quoted a Kool Keith thing. So Iron Maiden, you're right, because they're doing these mega world tours like in the early 80s. So first half of the 80s, like large tours, like 189 shows in the tour that support their fifth album, that the Live After Death album happened. So they're doing these like 1 year long tours. Then they take like a 3-week break or a 6-week break, and then they start writing the next album. That's just crazy. So yeah, I mean, I could see the big four listening to them in like 83, 84.
Yeah, and the point is, in the first 5 years, from 80 to 85, Iron Maiden put out 5 great albums with 2 different singers, 2 different drummers, 3 or 4 different guitarists through the lineup, and a fantastic live album, as you mentioned, Live After Death, all within from 80 to 85. I mean, right now we're in 2021. Iron Maiden hasn't put out an album in almost 6 years. Like, what they did in 5 years is just legendary.
Yeah, especially with that touring, especially because that was like pre-internet, pre-cell phone, like pre-anything. Planes probably had propellers still. Like who knows what was going on then? Like, it must have been really hard to travel. It wasn't as posh, that's for sure. And they're doing all these shows, and they went behind the Iron Curtain. They played their first show in South America at the first Rock in Rio to 350,000 people. I mean, we're probably as big as the Beatles in some ways. It's crazy. All right, so tell me about Iron Maiden. So, like, why, who, when? Who and when? What's Iron Maiden?
Well, I told you the when. It was the late 70s into their first album came out in 1980. The Who is Steve Harris. Steve Harris is the bassist. He doesn't sing. He does occasionally do backing vocals. He shouldn't. He writes a good chunk of the material and always has. And he's the driving force behind the band. He's this, kid. He started the band in like 75, and he is the only constant member throughout the whole time. Dave Murray, a lead guitarist, has been on every album. He's been there, there are a couple of years he was not in the band in the early nascent stages. He's a stabilizing influence, but he's not one of the big songwriters. The other guitarist, Adrian Smith, who's been in and out of the band, he's a big songwriter. The singer is Bruce Dickinson, who joined on their third album, The Number of the Beast, and then he left in the mid-90s for, half a decade, and then came back, had a solo career. The drummer, Nico McBrain, and he joined in the fourth album. And Yannick Gers, who, after Adrian Smith left in the late 80s, Yannick Gers comes in. In 2000, Adrian Smith comes back to the band, and they're like, well, Yannick's here too, so 3 guitarists. Awesome. And that's been the lineup since, 99 they got back. The 6 main guys.
Wow.
That I just mentioned.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was like listening to a teenage girl talk about One Direction.
Halfway through, I was thinking, I'm like, this is probably where Sadie gets this from.
Well, she be a great rock and roll writer. That's cool. I wonder if he ever met Roger Waters. I mean, especially when I listen to like The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which they actually wrote in a short period of time for their 5th album. But you're saying the bassist was in charge. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, 75 London, he probably ran into Waters. 2 bassists talking about a band.
I think they traveled in very different circles. You know, I see the relevance because he's kind of the leader of that band, but he was also the singer. Steve Harris was never the singer, and there was always that volatile relationship with the singer.
I agree.
That I think, you know, you need that dynamic. You need that oil and water. You need the yin and the yang to, you know, that explosiveness. And then throw in Adrian Smith as another writer, and it's just a 3-headed beast of a band.
Yeah. Also, albums were a little shorter, or seemed a little shorter back then, like 10 songs. So with three songwriters, I could see how you could crank it out fairly quick. Plus, you're playing all the time together on the tours and stuff, so you must have material from just being on the road.
Yeah, well, I think the first 2 albums came out. That was the stuff they'd been working up as a band coming up in the scene in London in the late 70s into the 80s. Uh-huh. You know, by the time you get to the second album, you've kind of gotten through everything. Yep. By the way, after their second album, Paul Di'Anno, the original singer, who, you know, just wasn't cut out to become a mega star on, you know, the professionalism that's required to do that. In comes Bruce Dickinson for their third album. All that stuff is brand new. Plus, you've injected now Bruce Dickinson into the band, who wrote songs, but because he was, you know, contractual obligations, he's not credited with them, but he definitely wrote a couple of the songs on Number of the Beast.
Wow. I don't even understand what that means. Contractually obligated, but not credited.
Like if you look at the songwriting credits, to The Prisoner, for example, it won't say Bruce Dickinson on there, even though he helped write the song. So
yeah, interesting.
On that album, Run to the Hills was their kind of breakthrough hit, you know, where they came into America. They were on MTV back when MTV played videos. This is 83. It was a big deal to watch videos on MTV. And they had, you know, the old Cowboys and Indians movies juxtaposed with Iron Maiden playing Run to the Hills, a song about Native American massacres in the 1800s. It was a interesting video. It was humorous, and the song rocked. It's anthemic. It would go in a movie. And that's when they broke through.
Yeah, they had all really good iconography as well. They have that skeleton. Eddie the skeleton.
Eddie the head. Eddie the Ed.
Yeah, that's the supposed name. Yep, Eddie the head. So tell me about Eddie. Where did Eddie come from?
So it started out when they were playing clubs in London. They wanted to set themselves apart. So they had smoke machines, they had some rudimentary pyrotechnics, and they had this mask that they hung up behind the stage, behind the drummer. And during the highlight of the show, when they were playing the song Iron Maiden, it would drip blood and smoke would come out of it. And that was like Eddie the Head. It was just a head-face mask.
Oh my God.
Fast forward to a couple years later, they get signed and they're looking for album covers for their band. They're flipping through this artist's work, Derek Riggs, and they come across this guy who's kind of like a skeletal zombie, and they adopt him, and he becomes their mascot. And it was fantastic.
Is he a zombie or a mummy?
He's had quite a number of travels.
Oh, okay.
He started out as kind of a zombie in the streets of London on the first couple albums, and then on the third album he goes down to hell.
Okay.
And he's like fighting with the devil. On the fourth album they've lobotomized him, and he's like locked up in a cell. By the way, that album is called Peace of Mind, Piece of Mind.
Nice.
So Peace, they've taken away the lobotomy. And that's kind of where I picked them up. I remember being in the Caldor and walking through the music section, and they would have Iron Maiden, Killers, Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, all lined up in a row, and you just looked at them as, you know, a 10-year-old kid, and you're like, they're comic book horror pictures, and I was just enthralled by it, and I was like, I have to listen to that. The only thing I knew was Run to the Hills, and then Peace of Mind came out in 83, so I would have been 10 years old. I listened to that, and I was freaking scared. First of all, it's the 80s, it's the satanic panic in the US, so, you know, Iron Maiden, they worship the devil. Okay, I'm 10. I go to church every Saturday night. No joke.
No, I'm not laughing.
And I listen to that. Their second song has like a prayer at the beginning of it. And it has all this imagery of Aleister Crowley symbolism.
Nice.
Then they have other songs about, dying and killing, and this creepy one called Still Life that starts out with a backwards message, like a full-on backwards message. So you knew it was evil. And the song told a story about this guy who kept going to the lake, and he was drawn and being pulled in by these mysterious faces, and he brings his girlfriend there too to look at the faces as well. And by the end of the song, it sucked them in. They jump into the pool and ostensibly drown. And as a 10-year-old kid, first of all, it's a great story. A short story, when you're that age, and what is maybe Poe or something like that, but it scared the hell out of me. So of course I'm hooked. They end the album, with a song about dinosaurs, and then the last one is about the book and movie Dune, which also the David Lynch version of that movie came out around that time. So Dune was kind of a popular concept. So that album just hooked me in, and still to this day, I would say is my favorite album.
Really? Like favorite all-time album?
Yeah.
Wow.
On the desert island, I have one
That's where
album.
I was going. That's so funny. I was not going to say it, actually. I was like, I'm going to respect him and his desert island this time. But okay. I can't believe you have one owl on the desert island. We'll have to talk about the rules another time. All right. So why'd they call themselves Iron Maiden?
It was just an evil thing. It's an old medieval torture device where it's in the shape of a woman and it closes around you and spikes you through. It's evil. It's all about getting attention and setting yourself apart and being the scariest. And look, they're not devil worshippers. It's definitely taken from a horror movie kind of spectacle, like smoke and mirrors type perspective. And certainly they're not from America. So, certainly we're more puritanical in the States here and more reactionary than what they might have been used to.
Yeah. And
or expecting.
I remember posters on my friends' walls, and back then we had these things called denim jackets, but you'd have the back painted like album covers or bands. And I remember
or the little buttons.
Yeah. Lots of Iron Maiden on denim jackets, on pins, on posters on walls in teenage boys' bedrooms. Yeah.
I had maybe 3 Iron Maiden.
I bet you had
posters,
the Trooper. You had the Trooper.
I absolutely had the Trooper.
Yeah, awesome.
I had 2 Minutes to Midnight. And then I had the one from the World Slavery Tour, which you mentioned, Eddie as a mummy. He'd been lobotomized in the 4th album, right. So he was encased in a tomb in ancient Egypt, and a pyramid motif was on the cover of the 5th album. So I had the World Slavery poster, and it's Eddie as a mummy biting through his chains, basically showing that he's being freed from his tomb to rise and take over the world.
That's awesome.
And which is exactly what they did. Iron Maiden's 5th tour, 84 to 85, you started talking about it. This is when they swept over the whole world. Run to the Hills, people knew. Their 4th album, The Trooper, Flight of Icarus, everyone knew those. Those were moderate hits in the hard rock world. And then the 5th album came out. Everyone is expecting it. And they come out with 2 Minutes to Midnight and Aces High, which are just... Everyone who likes metal knows those songs. And by that 5th album, they were just huge. And I'm now 12 years old or 13 years old, and it's a wonderful thing.
What happens after 85? Because we've been stuck in that time zone this whole podcast. What happens after the live album? Which, by the way, was good, as we talked about previously about live albums, because it gave them a break before they had to go back into the studio and do another studio album. So that was their first break in 5 years.
Yeah, so after being album tour for 5 years straight, and in fact had been on the road for a year plus, they took a year off. They were successful. And sometimes when you're successful and you've reached that top, you plateau a little. Or you can fall down the other side. And they kind of plateaued at that point. Bruce Dickinson, none of his songs made the next album Somewhere in Time.
Oh, wow.
Adrian Smith kind of took over. Wasted Years was on that album, which is one of my all-time favorite songs by them. It's very well constructed. You could play it on acoustic guitar. Anyone could cover that song and it would sound brilliant. You can do so many things. And this is where they kind of went into the synthesizer sound a little bit more. They would, have accents and flourishes, and occasionally there'd be a guy behind a screen, wearing a mask, playing keyboards along with them in the background. So here they kind of shifted into a longer, some of the speed, some of the snarl, some of the punkish attitude had gone away, and it got kind of rounded off. Certainly technically much better. The sound was better, the compositions were better, but the songs started to get a little bit longer, and dare I say, bloat at times.
They're getting older. They're probably starting families. They've been successful at this point. It's just harder to come with the hunger.
Yeah. So after Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, their seventh album, Adrian Smith leaves the band. He had been there since the second album. Mm-hmm. He kind of goes off. And so 90, No Prayer for the Dying, they try to go back to their roots, a more stripped-in sound, and, take that more street attitude that they had back a decade before, but it was forced. The songs just weren't there. And when you're a guy in the East End of London and you're scraping by for your next meal versus a guy who now lives in a mansion,
totally
it just wasn't there. And then their next album, Fear of the Dark, it went to #1 on the charts. It had one classic fantastic song, Fear of the Dark, very powerful live. You saw it live.
What year is this, you're saying? Is this when I knew you in college?
This is now 92.
Yeah,
so 90, disappointing album. It came out my first week of college.
Oh, man. Okay.
So that was disappointing. I saw them on that tour anyway. 92 was Fear of the Dark. I feel like that album might have come out like right around the time I met you.
Yeah, okay.
Or so.
Sure.
But it was hugely disappointing. And by then it was the grunge era. I was a radio DJ in the early 90s. We were definitely not playing Iron Maiden on college radio. And I wasn't even that into it. So I kind of grew away from it. Adrian Smith had left after Fear of the Dark. Bruce Dickinson leaves. That was huge. I mean, he was the voice of the band, and he leaves, and they replace him with this guy, Blaze Bayley, from this band Wolfsbane, who were... I had known of them. They weren't that big, but they were like Rick Rubin produced, so, they had some backup. But he just didn't have the voice that Bruce Dickinson had. They could not retain the fan base, and then... For my money, you have three main songwriters in the band. No offense to Yannick Garris, who does write some good songs here and there, and Dave Murray, who writes one every 5 albums. Adrian Smith's gone. Bruce Dickinson's gone. It's now all, 90+% now is on Steve Harris's shoulders. So you have less variety on the albums. You have a lot more long-winded, chugging songs. And then you have this voice that just, certainly can't match up with Bruce Dickinson. It sounded like Maiden, but it wasn't quite Maiden, and some people love that era. For me, it wasn't there.
The people who love those albums, are they like older than you or younger than you, or the same? Like was it because they got into them at a different time, like later, or is it because they were just so into them always?
A combination of that. Some people gravitate toward that style of songwriting, and like I said, it's all Steve Harris. So if
you're a bass player.
Well, yeah, it's less variety. But I have friends that have liked Maiden longer than me that love that album, and some younger people do as well. But picking up the story, 1999, Bruce Dickinson's coming back. Adrian Smith is coming back, and they put out an album. It was called Brave New World.
Oh, yeah.
It came out in early 2000, and that's when you joined the story.
Yeah, because I recognize that from my West Ham jersey.
Yes, so we saw Iron Maiden on the Brave New World tour
at Shoreline in Mountain View,
at Shoreline Amphitheater in Mountain View, California, and with Stratton and Brian McNamara, and they were fantastic. You tell me, that was probably your first Iron Maiden experience, right?
Yeah, they were great, and by that I mean I have no recollection really. I know, and I predicted they'd play the first 6 songs of the new album in order right off the album, and they did. And then they did all the greatest hits. So, I mean, it was probably better as it got darker. And I got the cool-ass jersey.
Sometimes people don't like it, and it disappoints some of the fans, because they will come out and they'll play 6 or 7 songs from their latest album. And some of their albums that have come out in the last 20 years, that means 6 songs are 48 minutes of the 100-minute set dedicated to some chugging and at times monotonous, occasionally self-indulgent, occasionally brilliant new songs. They do play the hits. They have so many hits to choose from. They can't please anyone all the time. I mean, I try to make an Iron Maiden greatest hits playlist, and it's like 47 songs or something.
That's
like
great.
that. I'm like, all right, that's
awesome.
That's like almost a third of their total output.
I was about to say,
let me see if I can.
Like Modest Mouse is like a band where it'd be like that too, where you're like trying to make greatest hits album. They have a lot of albums. They do sort of the same thing. By the way, I don't blame or like, how's this? I might have made fun of Iron Maiden back then for doing that, but I think Depeche Mode does the same thing. And as a fan of, how's this? As a person who's in a band, if I was putting out album after album, and I know everyone wants to hear my greatest hits set anyway, like I think that's why Jane's Addiction broke up after 2.5 albums, because they're like, people only want to hear these songs forever anyway. That you have to start. You're like your own opening band. You're like, hey, I know you liked me 10 years ago with all my greatest hits, and they were awesome, but I also wrote this new music, and I want to share it with you. I'm going to spend half the time doing that, but I'm going to do it in the beginning. I think that's great.
2015 was their last album, and 2010 was their album before that. So hopefully they'll do something again. You know, hopefully George R.R. Martin will put out another book someday. I mean, there's a lot to be waiting for, I guess. So have you spent any time listening to them at all?
Yeah, about 2 hours before, when I was watching Milo take a bicycle lesson, and he can ride a bike now, so that's good. But I listened to Live After Dark in order. And
Live After Death.
Whatever. What I say, Live After Dark? Is that like, that's porn, isn't it?
That's like Fear of the Dark and Live After Death.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, what I liked was when Rime of the Ancient Mariner came on. I thought that was really awesome. It's totally different. I like their Churchill quote in the beginning too. Like, I always liked the movie or like history interaction with visuals and lighting effects, which they were known for. Which,
Run to the Hills video, exactly.
And they were early people who did that. Like Pink Floyd. How's this? I basically love everything about the band except the music, because on their live album, when you look at the cover, which was done by the guy who does all the covers, they have 3 tombstones there, and they were really prideful of no overdubbing. Like everything had to be live. Like, that was their thing. And the 3rd tombstone says thank you, and that was apparently a homage to the Grateful Dead, which is just fascinating. Probably on 2 levels, like just the live part, like you're doing bootlegs, you're playing live, right? Playing live is a real thing for a musician. Like, that's music if you can play it live. So that's sick. But also, they're called the Grateful Dead. Iron Maiden, I'm sure strangely similar, like.
And as I mentioned last week,
understandings of death.
Another of the tombstones, the biggest of the tombstones, is said, "Here lies Eddie T," and the H is smeared out, but it's Eddie T. Head. And then there's a quote from H.P. Lovecraft right beneath that. And I just remember that standing out as well. And it's a fantastic cover. Right. It's that dark blue, and he's getting struck by lightning to raise him from the dead out of his grave. It's brilliant. You brought it up, the live show. And that's what got Iron Maiden fans initially. And that's why I go see them every tour, because they put on a fantastic show. You know, it brings back the memories I guess I had when I was 10 or 12 years old, first really getting into music.
I was going to say the same thing about the OCs for me, but I got them later. But like, they put out so many albums, but I mostly just go to the live show instead.
Well, Iron Maiden, on all of their tours, they play the same set list every single night of the tour. So people do get frustrated
so you only have to go to one show.
Especially because, you get to see on YouTube the next day the show, their live albums that they put out officially. That you can buy, and it's always the same.
Depeche Mode does that too, and they also do the same thing that we were just talking about, where they actually tend to play their first song off the album, off the new album. They always have an instrumental on the new album, and that's what they play before the show even starts. Which is a neat idea.
So Iron Maiden does, for the last, I don't know, at least 15 years, they've been alternating. They'll do a tour from their album, so they'll play 6 songs from the new album, 6 all-time classics that they play at every show, and then 6 other songs that, they play with some frequency. then the next tour will be all classic songs, and then the next tour will be the new album, and then all those other songs mixed in, and then they do it. The next tour is all classics.
Yes. No, what I like is on the album tours, you just said it's 666. 6 songs from the new album, 6 songs they play every show, and 6 songs they play from from apparently your 47 song playlist.
Yeah, but you know what? My math isn't good because almost all their sets are 15 or 16 songs.
Yeah, I like the energy. I like their artistry. I mean, both visually, pyrotechnically. I like their desire to be a live band. High vocals, man. I've just never gotten high vocals. Is there a band that I like that has high vocals? Oh, yeah, I got one. Yes.
Oh, man.
But yeah, I don't like the screechy vocals for the most part.
Fair enough. And, you know, the structure of the song, there's a lot of structure involved.
I'm okay with structure.
It's not freeform. There's nothing
that's why they're playing the same set.
Improvisational about it.
That's different than the OCs.
It's drama. It's stagecraft.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we promise it'll be a few more episodes before we get back into metal. We'll give Keith a little bit of a respite.
Yeah, thank you. All right, fans. Anyway. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're the New Dad Rock. Rocking out the ages. Eons. Ages.
With Stranger Eons. Death made that.